All right, everybody. Good morning, members, and welcome to LIBOR's Wednesday webinar series. My name is Leanna Inzerillo Werner, and I will be your host. Today is the first of 4 powerful sessions designed to help you market your business, led by industry experts. During our marketing month, we will be covering data, video content, Canva, AI, and so much more. Don't miss your chance to start 2024 on the right foot and register today at lirealtor.com/webinars. We are so fortunate to have Dr. Jessica Lautz here with us today, who will be presenting on how to use market data to improve your business and impress clients. Dr. Jessica Lautz is Deputy Chief Economist and Vice President of Research at the National Association of Realtors. The core of her research focuses on analyzing trends for both NAR members and housing consumers. Through the management of surveys, focus groups, and data analysis, she presents new and innovative ways to showcase results. She effectively utilizes research data to educate and impact policymakers on the state of the housing market and discusses research findings in major media outlets at international presentations. In 2001, Dr. Lautz was named one of Housing Wire's Women of Influence, a list representing 100 of the most influential women in leadership in the housing industry. In 2022 and 2023, Dr. Lautz was named a RIS Media Newsmaker in the Influencer and Crusader categories, respectively. She also volunteers at Nottingham Trent University as an industry fellow, mentoring real estate graduate students. Dr. Lautz will be taking questions. You can ask them using the Q&A feature on Zoom. She will answer them at the end, opposed to throughout the call. So, Jessica, we just want to say thank you and take it away.
Thank you so much for that really nice introduction. I am going to forewarn everyone, I have a little bit of a cold that I am trying to shake desperately. And actually, she was just so nice to recommend a tea, which I ordered quickly on Amazon while we were prepping here in the pre-call. So thank you so much. If I do have to pause for a second, just to take a sip, you can study the chart and I'll be right back with you, I promise, as soon as my voice recovers for a second. So, all right, let's jump in. This is an incredibly crazy market right now. When we just think about the difficulties that both consumers are facing, but that realtors are facing in this market right now too, as we know that interest rates have gone up, and inventory is so constrained. So I'm going to go over a lot of bad factors, and then I promise you I'm going to get into some good stuff too. So as we look at the market today, what I will say is that interest rates for the last 5 weeks have been ticking down. This is a good thing. As we look at interest rates right now, they are coming down, and we do expect moving into the spring, we're actually going to see rates into the 6% range, and that's going to be welcome relief for consumers. Not only buyers, not just first-time home buyers, but also thinking about potentially sellers who have a lock-in effect right now with their lower interest rates that they may have taken on in the pandemic years and really just don't have a willingness to move or cannot afford to move. So if rates tip down, hopefully we'll see some more movement among sellers and buyers being able to enter into the market. What I would say right now is that for any potential first-time home buyers, this is their moment, because as we expect that interest rates are going to move down into the 6% range as we look at spring, inventory is very tight. We know that we have very, very limited housing inventory right now. So as we think about potentially talking to first-time home buyers, if they want a more normalized market where they actually have an opportunity for the limited inventory that does exist, they may want to look at the market right now in the winter months. It's always traditionally better for first-time home buyers, but that's definitely one reach out point to first-time home buyers right now. When we look at affordability, we know it's incredibly difficult for consumers right now. 20% would be the norm historically that someone would be paying towards their mortgage payment when we think about both the mortgage and the cost of the home. And right now we know that we're well above that. In fact, on the latest monthly data, close to 26% of income headed towards their monthly payment right now if they were to purchase a home. It's not a surprise given that the household income of buyers in the last year has actually jumped pretty considerably. It's about $20,000 more for all buyers and nearly $25,000 more for first-time home buyers. So essentially, we're seeing wealthy home buyers move into today's housing market versus someone who would be at the more affordable price point. So looking at school teachers, perhaps, or bus drivers, social workers being really priced out of today's housing market based on just the overall cost of homes. What we also know is that in today's housing market, we are seeing that the down payment has gone up, and it's actually at a 20-year high for repeat buyers and first-time buyers in the market. And for repeat buyers, it's probably not a surprise because they have a lot of housing equity. So thinking about the ability that they have to really move on to their next home, to put a large down payment down, so that they're not burdened by a larger mortgage payment because of the higher interest rates. So paying down that rate essentially with this large down payment. We know for first-time home buyers, it's likely a couple of factors here. One, the household income for buyers is up. So these are wealthier home buyers who can afford to put down a larger down payment. But also, we know that multiple bid situations are still happening with limited inventory. So perhaps saying, look, I have more skin in the game. I'm putting down a large down payment. I have solid finances. Here's a really solid earnest payment, but also a large down payment as well. That being said, I think it's really important to remind potentially first-time home buyers that there are low down payment options out there, like FHA loans, VA loans, USDA loans. People are very unaware of those, and we've done research actually in the last month that shows just how unaware they are. Consumers don't apply for these programs. They don't talk to mortgage brokers about them because they don't know they exist. So making sure that the word is out about these programs could help potentially first-time home buyers enter into the market sooner rather than later. Okay, here's the another bad thing here before we get into the good stuff. Inventory is still down. This is both a twofold problem here. For existing homes, we know that inventory is low because of the lock-in effect of those lower interest rates, people's just unwillingness or inability to be able to afford a new home right now. But we also know we've been underbuilding in the US for well over a decade, really coming out of the Great Recession. So we don't have new inventory coming into the market either. As we look at this, hopefully, as we move into the spring months, we will have more inventory coming into the marketplace, and this will be less of a problem. But right now, it's incredibly restrictive. If we think about that $4 million units in the marketplace that was coming out of the Great Recession, so it's a long time ago at this point, but there was a lot of inventory in the market in comparison today. You could actually see that really sneaking into the pandemic, we had nearly 2 million units in the marketplace, and today just 1. So really, this is one of the biggest hurdles, is just finding a right property. On the good side, we do still see a lot of demand for housing. We have 2.5 offers for every home that's listed right now. Still largely a seller's market in most areas of the country. In the most recent Metro price data, we saw year-over-year home price increases in more than 80% of markets. For most sellers, their home is moving under a month, with typical days on market is at 24. So moving pretty quickly in today's market because of the lack of inventory. We do see bidding wars that are happening. And in about a quarter of, for a quarter of most recent sellers, their home moved more than the asking price, more than the list price of the home. So we are still seeing a very competitive atmosphere. All cash buyers, I'm going to spin this one as good, just so we have some more good points here. All cash buyers are trending higher. And for the last year, we've actually seen them more than a quarter of the market. Most recent month's data is at 29%. I suspect, we don't forecast this number, but I suspect that we're still going to continue to see pretty large share here. The reason why is because we don't have a lot of housing inventory. And so if we see a multiple bid situation, that all cash buyer is likely going to win that bid. The other reason why is home prices continue to go up. So home owners are continuing to earn more housing equity. So in that scenario, they likely are able to move into their next purchase, raising either a very large down payment, as we saw, or they're paying all cash for the next home. The other two factors that play here too are that long distance movers are more likely to pay all cash, as well as baby boomers. In fact, we saw half of older boomers are paying all cash for their home. So in this scenario, in this market, we know that baby boomers are the dominant force in the market. They are the biggest share in the market. And so we likely will continue to see this pretty high. why am I spending this as good? Well, they don't care about interest rates. So that's the bad news, right, of the day. And these buyers don't care at all. And there is a very significant share of the market. So I would say that on the good side, I'm going to put this in the plus column. It is bad for first-time buyers. It's bad for buyers who are trying to enter who can't pay all cash, but it is good for these buyers to move through with a transaction pretty seamlessly. Also good news, we are seeing that distressed sales are at 2% of the market. So we just don't see them in the market today. People have a tremendous amount of housing equity. The typical homeowner has been in their home for a decade and they have $200,000 in housing wealth that they're sitting on right now. So they're good. And so even if something in their life were to happen that they may encounter a sudden change, like a job loss or a death in the family, they likely would not be in a scenario where they would even lose their home. And if they had to move from their home, they likely would be in a scenario where they would leave with cash in hand, perhaps to rent for a temporary time period or to figure out what's going on as they figure out what's going on with their family. All right. This is where I'm going to pause and say, traditionally, I put in a couple slides for our new housing forecast and you'll have the latest and greatest. I'm actually going to pause here and say, I'm not going to do that. And the reason why is because on Tuesday, we're going to have our big year-end real estate forecast summit. And the forecast is going to be all new. So there's no point in me putting in an old forecast right now when we know that we're going to tweak that come Tuesday. The event is free. It's open to the public, to NAR members. Feel free to register. Even if you can't attend on Tuesday, we send you the recording. So please feel free to, you can Google this, or I know this link is not live, easy to grab on Zoom, but if you want to, please do register. Lawrence Yun, our chief economist, will be giving his forecast, top 10 markets of the year, moving forward into 2024. Then we're going to have two panels. One is residential that I'll be moderating, and one is on commercial, which he'll be moderating. So please do join us. It's only an hour. But again, you can get the recording and all of the materials as well sent directly to your email box if you just register as well. All right. Moving on here, a little on generational warfare that we're seeing right now. This is the entire US population right now. So looking at the pandemic kiddos born in the last couple of years in the green, and then with mortality rates, unfortunately, we just don't see that many people making it past like 100 years old, so the bars get shorter. So each one of these lines represented by how many people are in each age category. When we look at this chart here, a couple really big takeaways. So the millennial generation, you can see, is the biggest generation in the US right now. It is very visually easy to see here on this chart that they are in the blue. The first red bar is 35 years old. That is the median age of a first-time home buyer today. This is good news because as we look at this, we can see this population peak right here. And this little population is trying to move in to find their first home. We have a lot of young adults who are trying to enter into homeownership. 35 years old is towards the oldest spectrum that we have seen for first-time home buyers. Last year it was 36, so it's ticked down a little, but last year was an all-time high. If we look back at this back in the 1980s, what we do see is the traditional first-time home buyer was about 28 to 29 years old. So this is much higher than what we have seen historically. On the bad side, that's lost housing equity, potentially for that first-time home buyer, as they would have purchased a home at 28 versus 35 today. Also thinking about that 7 years of life, really different time span for that individual and that buyer and where they are in their life. So potentially one less move. But again, on the good side, we do see this population who should be moving in is putting a lot of pressure on the housing market trying to find their first home. Okay, the baby boomers, when we look at the yellow here, what we can see is that this generation, second biggest generation in the US today, 58 years old is the median age of a repeat buyer. So moving into boomer territory at that point, what we can see is that is the second oldest age that we've actually seen for the repeat buyers as well. In fact, if we look back at the 1980s, the typical repeat buyer was just 28 or was 36 years old. 36 years old was the typical repeat buyer age, and today 58. So this is a really dramatic shift as we think about this, as someone who wants something very different in their home, perhaps thinking I'm going to age in place because they plan on living in that home for 15 years as a median. So really no intention of leaving that home. This is, I think, a huge transition, and it's putting a lot of pressure onto the housing market as we think about the baby boomer population who has a lot of housing equity, has a lot of cash, is able to make these all cash purchases. At the same time, millennials are aging into home ownership right now as well. So all of the memes and the reels and everything else, quite true when we look at the housing market and the pressure that we're feeling. Gen Xers being lost in the middle, but I'll show you a chart in this in a second that shows that Gen Xers are pretty steady in the housing market. As we look at the homeownership rate for those who are under the age of 35, and we look at this historically, what we can actually see is the red bar is the historical norm. Unfortunately, for today's young adults, for millennials, keeping the colors the same as blue, what we can see is they've actually never hit that red line. So their homeownership rate has been so underproducing, so suppressed, that they have actually never hit the historical average for boomers and for Gen Xers that they saw, unfortunately. So really difficult housing market when we think about today's young adults, their ability to save for a mortgage, the low inventory, the affordability conditions that we already talked about, but then thinking about all those factors outside the housing market too, like student loan debt, which is now back on, and thinking about childcare costs for someone who's 35 years old, may have a child, but they need to now save for a down payment while paying for that. Car loans, credit card debt, so on and so on, making it very difficult. Okay, so looking at home buyers by generation, keeping the colors the same here, what we can actually see is that in the last decade, for 8 years of the last decade, millennials were the biggest population of home buyers. That blue in the last year, they dropped down considerably. Baby boomers overtaking them as that biggest population this year. And Gen Xers, why I'm not so concerned, why I don't focus too much on them in this presentation, is because they're pretty steady in the housing market with this purple, kind of under the fray of these two generations duking it out here, and they're a quarter of the market. For Gen Xers, though, they are in their peak earning years. They're buying the most expensive homes. They are caring for lots of people within this household. So kids under the age of 18, kids over the age of 18 who may have boomerang back, elderly parents, a lot of pressure on that Gen X generation, but not really duking it out there. Gen Zers, so the youngest generation out there of adults today, so thinking about late teens, early 20s, they're 4% of buyers overall. They are coming into the housing market. I think this is very good news because they are saying, this is my American dream. I want to enter into homeownership. They are doing so largely, though, with mom and dad's money to do so. First-time homebuyers in the last year sneaking up a little bit. I think this is because the competition, the fierce competition that we saw in the last couple of years has ticked down a little bit. So we're at 32% of the market in the last year, sneaking up from a historic low of 26%. That was the lowest share we've ever recorded last year. So coming up a little bit, but the historic norm is 38%. So we're still well under that for a healthy share of first-time homebuyers in the market. But we are seeing a rising share in this last year. But I have to say, while we're seeing this rising share, they're older. They're significantly wealthier at $25,000 more earning power this year than the year before. The other thing that we saw in the data too is that they are more likely to have financial assets that they're using for a down payment. So thinking about 401k, their stocks, their bonds, either cashing that out or borrowing against them to have their down payment. Why I pause on that is because this is actually overtaking for first-time home buyers, the bank of mom and dad, which is always a very traditional source of where you find your down payment. I think it's quite important as we think about today's first-time home buyers as being more financially savvy, being wealthier, being able to overcome all of these hurdles in the housing market. So seeing them a little bit differently than what we would have historically for first-time home buyers. Today's senior buyers, I want to give you a few trends here because this is really quite different than what we have seen historically, and what perhaps you may expect for senior buyers in the market. We actually do see that the number one reason to actually move today is to be close to friends and family, and that's for all all sellers. So when we think about seniors today, they're really dominating the seller's market. They may be following the grandbaby. Why is this important? Well, it's a choice. This is something that's quite different than what we have seen in the past few years, where you move because you have a new job. You move because you have a family change, such as a marriage or a divorce or a new baby. These sellers are making the choice to purchase a new home because they can, because they want to be close to friends and family. And I think this is a very big difference when we look at this as an optional move, essentially. When they do move, they're not necessarily downsizing. Some of them are, but it's not as frequent as we have seen, and it's not as much square footage reduction as we have seen in the past as well. Just a couple hundred square feet versus, say, 500 square feet. They're also, again, purchasing to live there for a long period of time. Some of the things that we may think of as young adult trends, we are seeing for senior buyers: purchasing with roommates, smart home features, green features. These are more popular with senior buyers than perhaps we would have thought as well. Multi-generational buying. This is 14% of all home buyers are purchasing a multi-generational home. This is pretty striking to me, to tell you the truth, because it is such a large share. If we think about all home buyers today and 14% purchasing a multi-generational home, the number one reason to do so is for an aging parent to move into that household, or an elderly relative, may not be a parent. We do see, I think, coming out of COVID, that people want to take care of each other a different way. Again, thinking about the number one reason to actually sell a home is to be close to friends and family. Now we're seeing this huge share of multi-generational homes. I just think it's the way that family is supporting each other, thinking about the support system differently. We also see high numbers of multi-generational buying just for the reason of cost savings and affordability. Buying a larger home together where everyone can be together. Maybe it's the same generation, but it helps to purchase in a better place. We also do see that young adults boomeranging back, certainly a high share as well. So thinking about them either temporarily moving back or permanently moving back, regardless, this is pretty consistent in the data. A few more demographic changes here. We overall in the US see that marriage rates are down. Back in the 1960s, 70% of American adults were married. Today, it's just half. As we see this reduction in marriage rates in this country, we do see this reflected in homebuyer data as well. This is especially true for first-time home buyers. I'm going to take a little sip here. This is especially true for first-time home buyers, where we see a smaller share of married couples, down from 75% now at 52%. On the flip side, we see a rise in single women and a rise in unmarried couples. I think this one's pretty interesting. Single women are really outperforming single men at 19% compared to 10%. But she's doing so on a lower household income. She's saving for a longer period of time. She's making more financial sacrifices to enter into homeownership. I think this is pretty powerful when we look at this, just the value that single women are placing on homeownership. We also see unmarried couples are a growing share in the marketplace as well. So maybe they'll get married later, maybe they won't, regardless, a growing share. And roommates also purchasing here. So Golden Girls phenomenon, Grace and Frankie phenomenon. We're seeing it for older adults. We're also seeing it for first-time home buyers. It seems to be something that may be sticky as we think about housing affordability being such a challenge. Another one that we are seeing too is that we are in an all-time low of recent home buyers who have a child under the age of 18 in their household. Back in 1985, it was 58% of all buyers, and today it's just 30% of all buyers. There's a lot of reasons behind this. So if we think about, there's a larger share of repeat buyers. Median age of repeat buyers is now 58 years old. We can certainly see a clear line there that at 58 years old, you could have a child, but that kid could be out of the household, in college, living independently, and so on. We also know that birth rates overall in this country are down. Certainly, if I look on Instagram, which I was last night, getting videos of dinks, dual income, no kids. Certainly, plenty of households celebrating that and saying, "Let's purchase a home." We have more buying power without a child in tow too. So I think there's lots of things at play. Why does this matter? Well, it's going to change up where people are looking for their house. So thinking about neighborhood choice, where that perfect school is going to move down in the priority list. And we certainly have seen that. If we look overall in the US, we actually know that it's only 40% of US households today do have a child under the age of 18. That's a very small share in comparison to what we have seen historically, just 40%. This is a much lighter note, but 70% have a pet. And on the flip side, we are seeing that pets as a factor of neighborhood choice have actually grown in importance. So we had seen it was 15% in recent years. It's moved up to 19% of all home buyers are factoring in their pet into their neighborhood choice. As I'm currently dog sitting my sister's dog, and I personally have way too many cats in this household, I know that this is a huge factor. As I think about walking this dog that is not my dog, and it's very, very cold here in the DC area today, I totally get it. We are seeing that not only will this change the neighborhood choice, if we actually look at single women and we look at unmarried couples, so it's two growing shares of home buyers, we actually see that it's closer to 30% are factoring in their pet into their neighborhood choice. Again, a much lighter note than what we have seen historically. Back to the office. This is a big trend. We're heading towards the end of the year. Many CEOs, again, switching up. What is the requirement moving into 2024? As we look at this, it is changing where people are moving and where they want to be. So we have seen that commuting costs are back on as a more important factor than they have been in the last couple of years. So moving into 24% of buyers factoring that in to now 31% are considering that very important this year. So again, where is the office? How close? How many days a week do you have to be in there? Can you take public transportation? Do you have to drive, etc.? And how much does that cost? Looking at the distance moved, this is also changing. And I think this has to do with one, looking at the household income of home buyers and also looking at workplace trends as well. So if we look from 1989 to 2021, what we saw is people moved just 10 to 15 miles. Last year, they moved 50. So they moved really far out, really seeking a new property. This year, they moved 20. So still elevated from what we have seen historically, but not as far as the really long distance move last year. Another factor that I think is at play here too is that 5% of buyers in the last month worked with a realtor who purchased a home physically sight unseen. They didn't go into that property before purchasing that home. So they worked with a realtor. The realtor told them what that home looked like. They may have FaceTimed that home, etc., but they didn't physically go there. We've been tracking this since the pandemic started, really to get a good understanding of what's going on in the marketplace. It had been about 10% of the market in most recent months. It's gone down to 5%. I think there's a few things going on here. One, it's long distances, But the other thing is tightened inventory. If that home's going to be under contract by the end of the weekend and you can't actually get there, you're going to work with your realtor who you've been working with to actually see that home for you. And we consistently see this. I'll be very interested to see as we go into the winter months, but then also into the spring, as demand traditionally comes pretty strong in the spring, where this number goes as well. I just want to really hit home here that real estate really does matter. At the end of the day, it's how we build our nest eggs. We are traditionally not good savers in the US. This is where homeowners have their net worth, is really in their home. In fact, they have about $400,000 as in net worth as homeowners versus about $10,000 as renters. It is a very, very big difference. And with the expectation that home prices will continue to rise, we do have the expectation that net worth will continue to build for homeowners. This has been, I think, a rough couple of months as we think about the agent rule and headlines and verdicts. And I just want to say, when I look at the data, it just doesn't make any sense to me at all, because 89% of buyers are using an agent. They want an agent, and an agent is valued to them, and they are recommending the agent after using that agent, and they would use them again. When we ask buyers the benefits of an agent, it's not just finding that right home. It's also help with negotiation, which no one knows how to do or wants to do on their own. Thinking about how difficult the housing market is, that in the last months, as we head into fall, even that 2.5 offers is normal. People need their contract accepted. They want it accepted. They want to get into that home. And that's where the buyer's agent comes in. That's where you come in to really help people have their offer accepted. When we look at sellers, we can also see that 89% of sellers are using an agent, and they need that agent to price their home competitively in this very changing market than where we have been the last couple of years, to market that home in a very different market than where we have been, using more online tools than ever to show that home virtually, to stage that home, and then to find that qualified buyer and do so all within a specific time frame. We know that there's tons of business models out there. We ask a question about what sellers are using more, and it's that full service agent that people are using more than ever, that people really want to use with their transaction. For sale by owners, FSBOs, is just 7% of the market, and half of those transactions are arm's length. People know the buyer of that home. It's a friend or a relative, so it's not necessarily an open market transaction. That is all I have prepared for remarks, but I'm happy to take any questions that you may have as well.
Jessica, we do have one if you're ready.
Yeah.
It says, you said to let buyers buy now as interest rates will be lower next year and inventory is low, but also said more inventory is expected next spring. Would the lower interest rate not be the more appealing time to buy as more inventory comes on the market?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So here's my concern about as we move into the spring. Unless we have substantially more inventory, there's going to be a lot of demand coming in. And so, especially for first-time home buyers out there, they may face a really difficult market in the spring as they're really struggling to get their offer accepted. So if we think at the really frenzy time, and I don't think we're going to get close to this, but we don't forecast it, so I don't know for sure. But if we remember that really intense time period where you could see a home for 15 minutes, you had to make a decision really quickly, there were intense bidding wars. I would hate to have a first-time home buyer who has an opportunity this winter to find a home in the neighborhood they want to be able to see that home, really lose out in the spring. So that's kind of the argument that I would pose to potential first-time home buyers right now, is this is going to be a more calm market, and winter is always a more calm market for first-time home buyers regardless, but especially knowing that interest rates should be ticking down in the spring based on inflation, that would be my expectation.
Thank you so much. I don't have any additional questions at this time. But Jessica, can people come and find you if they have additional questions, or what's the
Please.
best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So social media below, but you can always send me an email too. It's jlouts@nar.realtor. And I just want to give a shout out to Mark Donnelly, who I know is very active on the LIBOR board. He was our research committee chair last year, and he was just amazing to work with. So you all are very fortunate to have him.
Yes, we are. And he just did an NAR Drive podcast with Marky, I think, a
Great.
couple of days ago. So lots of great stuff with him these days. But Dr. Louts, I just want to say thank you so much again for presenting for our members. This has been so informative. I have a few comments who are saying how informative it was, and we're very honored to have you. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Okay.
All right, everyone. Thank you. And be sure to register for our upcoming webinars at larealtor.com/webinars. Lots of great marketing stuff coming down the pipe, but we'll see you soon. See you next time. Bye, everybody.